Hey team, this is a summary of the warm embrace, and I'm just going to get my screen set up the right way. Just give me 2 secs. And I'm bringing you this on a day that Victoria has crossed 1,400 cases, which is exciting, but the wrong type of exciting. This is really relevant though, because, at the moment, you're in one of two circumstances in Australia, either in one of the states that has large numbers of community transmission of COVID, and obviously that's New South Wales or Vic, or you may well be in one of the zero COVID states, in which case life has been very different for you for a while, and the opposite of difficult. Well, actually, I should say it's probably difficult for different reasons, but know that what we are experiencing in our states is likely coming your way. That is part of the national roadmap. And so one of the things that is going to be really, really important for you is how you unlock discretionary effort with your team. And I just want to share with you a model that is something that a good friend of Sachin's and mine, Simon Bowen, shared with us. Simon, at one of the events that he was presenting at, followed Rick Charlesworth onto the stage. And this is an analogy that we're going to take from the sporting world. So on the base layer of this pyramid is the kind of place, the layer that we all occupy somewhere or other. And that is the layer of the spectator. And you can see that this pyramid is biggest at the base. So in many areas in life, not many, actually all areas of life, there are way, way more spectators than there are people on the field of endeavour. So the next layer above, and the problem with being a spectator is sometimes you can forget which side of the fence you're actually on. It can feel like you're in the field of play, or you're kind of close enough to the field of play that you feel as if you could do it. The truth is, crossing the fence and getting in the arena is a very, very different game altogether. In fact, it's the difference between being in the game and not being in the game. We all know that person who's a spectator who acts like a participant. This could be your mate that's an expert on investing in property, doesn't own one property, knows everything about the share market or Bitcoin or something, but does none of it. And business is the same thing. In business, there are always people who have advice about what you should do if you run a business. They have never, ever, ever run a business. So sometimes the jump from spectator to participant is enough that people are excited to be there. I mean, I know, when my son actually did Little League, and we got to play on the MCG, back in the days where I used to play footy out there. And we also played at, it would have been Etihad at the time, now Marvel Stadium. And he got to actually be on the arena. And because he was out there, I got to go out there umpiring and, helping out, try and look after kids that are 8 or 9, thereabouts. In any case, that was exciting for me to be on the field, because I had often sat as a spectator, but clearly very different to being in a game. And we all know people that, as I said, are spectators but talk as if they're playing the game. Once we get into the game, though, just being there isn't enough. It isn't enough to be in the game. We really need to be focused on winning. And again, all of us will have teams that we follow, even if it's our kids' sporting teams. There are very different habits and behaviours and mindsets associated with winners versus participants. The people that are still just happy to be there. And you can see this at elite level sport. There are still people at elite level sport that just, despite having a fairly narrow window where they're at their peak physically and are able to engage in the game, they just don't do the habits that are necessary for winning. And then right at the top, there's a layer that is for champions. And you'll see that all of these layers just have very, very different attributes. The spectator layer, as I said, you can be lulled into thinking that, you know what's going on, and you might from a superficial level, but that's the iceberg, right? You're literally seeing only the tip of the iceberg. You do not see any of the rest of the play. In fact, you're often making the mistake of the participants, which is that you are chasing the ball and you are following the ball, and you are not watching what's happening away from the ball, which is really where the game is played in every sport. That's about structure, about position, about defense, about setting up in front, behind the ball, irrespective of what the sport is. What happens with the players that don't have the ball is really, really critical. And the same thing is true in business, because you need to be organising your team around the times that you do not have people to serve, you do not have patients to serve in our case. And then when we get to the winning layer, these people just have different habits from those below. And the biggest change, and one of the things that I noticed a lot from watching the Jordan Rules, the Last Dance, as it was called, on Netflix, was that the intensity that people bring to the training is the same or higher than what they bring to a game. And this is something that my friend Simon shared about the talk that Rick Charlesworth gave. Now, Rick Charlesworth is very famous Australian athlete and coach. He played first-class cricket, West Australian. He also coached the women's and the men's national hockey teams, field hockey, as Americans call it, and to a great amount of success. And one of the comparisons I've often made between business and sport is that business is less like a family. So families really are more about unconditional love, and they're not necessarily about performance, whereas sporting teams are around roles and goals. And I'd always thought that business was more like elite sport than it was a family. Actually, Rick said, you know what, it's nothing like elite sport. And the reason he said, and this is what those on the champion layer understand, the reason he said it is nothing like elite sport is quite simply that the hardest bit of work that anybody does when they join a business is when they're actually on the battlefield, when they're out there serving patients, customers, clients, whatever you want to call the people that you serve. Hardest work they do. They do not train harder than they work. But in elite sport, the training is the hardest thing you'll ever do. So that when you get out on the field, and this is often spoken of as sweat in training, so you don't bleed on the field. And the hardest bit of work you do is training and getting ready. And then when you get out to actually do the job, that is the easiest part of what you do. So there is a difference between champions and those that just win. And champions win regularly. They're the ones that that when push comes to shove, they've done that little bit more work before and after the event. And then when we bring this back to a team environment and we bring it back to you as a leader, ultimately there are two levers that you have in your business. The first lever is your own effort. And your effort is by definition finite. And you have limits around exactly how much of that you can allocate. And also, I'm going to say the quality of what you can do, because the work you do as a GP, and most of you as owners are doctors, can be quite spirit heavy, can be task heavy, and it can be decision dense. So, you might find that there's not a lot of you to be sharing along the way. And then what happens is, typically when you start a business, and sometimes people never grow beyond this, what happens is you're operating towards this end. So you can see that the vast bulk of the workload is done by you. So you probably got a 90%, 10% split, where and you might not even be doing all of the work, but what might be happening here is that you're actually, you're starting the work, you're the ideas creator, you're the one who is getting things moving. And if you don't actually ever move this along, your job in life is to move this towards this end where you are the fire starter and it is more like 10% and 90%. And whilst the capacity of your team isn't infinite, it is certainly much greater than you. And again, all of us will have backed for a team that is highly dependent on one champion to get them out of a hole all the time. And it just can't be done. If we go back to the Last Dance, with Michael Jordan. You know, it took him 6 or 7 years to realize that irrespective of his status as probably the greatest of all time, without bringing his team into the game, he was not going to win a championship. And he'd gotten very close. So it was actually quite fortunate that he never won in those early years, or it might have reinforced a belief. And one of the things that happens down here is if it is to be, it's up to me. It's not about the team. And you usually see great teams that go through the stages of participant to winning to champion. What happens is most of the players go from personal output. They start to focus on team output and their role in the team. And this is a really, really important upgrade. Well, how's that relevant for today? You'll have received the paperwork or digital documentation around the warm embrace. And this is really about elevating the performance of your teams. This is around the pyramid that I just walked you through. But if you ever get a chance to go to Egypt and travel comes back in the future, I recommend you get to Cairo and have a look at Saqqara, the step pyramid. That is pretty cool. Now, one of the key things with team performance is almost all of us know about somebody who is not performing well. And in many cases, look, it could be you. Excuse me. And if it is you, I'm going to walk you through what you need to do to elevate your performance. But oftentimes, it's somebody on your team that kind of everybody knows is a low performer and is not particularly adherent to, the values and principles of the practice. And this is one of the things that always surprises me with hospitals. Hospitals often say, you know what, it's going to take us a while to turn around performance and behavioural issues. Actually, I believe that's not true. Almost everybody knows who the arseholes are. All you need to do is sack them, get rid of them, and then the performance improves. Again, take this back to team sport. You've got a really selfish genius of a player. That's the only reason they stick around is they're gifted. And probably a few names come to mind. But those players, once they are moved on, the team performance elevates massively. So you need to lance the boil. You must address what everybody knows to be the case. Just call the ghost, go and make the decisions that you need to make. Now, if it is you, the question is, what do you do? Well, what you need to do is apologise for your shitty leadership and seek forgiveness and permission to lead the team. So you would quite literally go and say, I apologise for my poor leadership on this matter. I haven't given sufficient clarity to people about what their roles, their goals, and their reporting structure is. I promise to be better, and I'm seeking your permission to lead you going forward. And wait, people have a voice, they can exercise that choice. This is the values performance matrix that we use when assessing who we hire. Firstly, we all know the saying to hire slow and fire fast. And in the smaller team you have, you do not have latitude for anybody that is outside really that top box, high alignment to performance and high alignment to values. What I mean by performance, I mean discharging the technical skills related to your job. So, how good are you at your job? And then the other one is how aligned to the values are you? Are you prepared to trample other people to get what you want? Are you prepared to get things done anyway? Again, if we take it back to one of the funniest things, and there wasn't a lot funny about it, but the Essendon Football Club had their difficulties with use of illegal substances, and they had a sign out the front of the club. It was one of their slogans, and the slogan was "Whatever it takes," which kind of sounds good before you realise that actually they've been involved in a doping scandal. And you may have different views as to how legal or illegal it was, but either way, it was certainly something taken that was in a very grey area of the rules about getting an advantage over others. And so, be really careful about the values that you live and that you publicly espouse. If you have values, then it's really important that people are held to those values. So this is about how aligned are people to the values and how reliably do they discharge their duties that are part of their position description, and maybe outside of that, but be very careful about getting into other people's jobs. And so if you're low on either axis, you're just gone. Really, there's no place for people, and the flawed genius is usually the one that sticks around. So the doctor that's really unpleasant, but is the highest billing doctor in the team. I always say you haven't come of age in business until you've fired your highest billing doctor. I've done that twice. And each time afterwards was one of the greatest moments ever, in that the culture of the practice improved dramatically. I just don't go through that now. If those people come and there's a whiff that they're that kind of a person, if they are applying to work with us or they come on board, then they're very quickly moved on. So make sure that you do regularly assess the performance and values of your team, and you make the necessary adjustments rather. Now, this is, I'm sure you recognize this molecule. This is oxytocin. And I do know that this is oxytocin because I've checked it. Now, oxytocin is the love hormone. You need to show your team some love. And in the book, you'll see in the workbooks associated with this, you'll see that there's an area where you can record how you're acknowledging success at the moment. As type A personalities, and I'm going to put you all in the same group with me, sometimes what happens is we're not particularly effective at acknowledging success. We literally approach it like consulting. Next, just go and get the next project in, get the next problem to solve in. And we don't sit back and celebrate the wins, which can be really hard on the people around us. So let's make sure we do our best to acknowledge the team around us. And remember, when you're talking about something you can feel uncomfortable speaking about things that you've contributed to, make it about the team's success. Remember to use a story brand mindset. You are just the guide and the teams are the heroes. Also, you're going to need to be like this guy and be all ears. When you first get around involving your team in elevating performance, you're going to do a lot of listening. Problems are not solved by giving advice or speaking. They are solved by listening. So make sure that your first priority is to listen and to capture all of the feedback that people are giving you. That's really, really important. And you need to listen without judgment. That's the most important part here. And one of the features of psychological success is a quality of voice. So you need to make sure there are people that are not being heard and that they are elevated. I remember as a GP back when I was working in St Albans, one of my patients was a post person, and he was really interesting because I used to ask people a lot about their jobs. You know, I enjoy listening to how people fill their time. And this guy said, look, I know everything about this suburb and the businesses in this suburb because I'm invisible. Nobody really ever sees me because I'm in red and I'm in plain daylight. But he gets to see in that point in time anyway, he was seeing all the red letters. So he could tell you all the businesses that were failing, all the bills that were piling up. He knew who was sleeping with who in the neighborhood because he knew where the cars were. He literally knew everything because he was invisible and nobody ever asked him anything. And he actually would have been a great source of feedback. So the question is, who is it that is invisible in your organization and does not have a voice? When you are running meetings, if you are chairing them, it is important that your voice is not the dominant voice in the room. You must be getting others to speak up, because if you don't hear from them, then it's likely that you are not getting a full breadth of understanding about all of the issues in your practice. So please, please, please make sure that you extract and you give people a platform to speak, particularly those that may not routinely speak. They could be medical students, they could be junior staff, they could be new staff. Just make sure there's a platform for them to be heard and for you to listen. And you might structure it such that there is a formal feedback group, and it might be that you have an internal one, which is fairly easy. If they're salaried, then it's about time and structure to make sure that they can give you feedback as to the different areas of the business that you need to understand and know where the problems are. And know what's working. Again, this needs to be a mechanism for celebrating success too. And if you want to do this externally, you might put together a group of critical friends. And critical friends are patients of the practice that you bring together just for feedback as to changes you're proposing to make or changes you have made and how they've been received, and making sure that you are serving and addressing their needs as well as possible. All of this work is about harnessing discretionary effort. We know there are studies after studies after studies that show that most people don't give that much of a stuff about their workplaces, and they are heavily disengaged. So most people seek more autonomy around what they're doing. That is their main focus. So if you can give people autonomy, you can give them something that they feel that they have responsibility and accountability for. People like to feel like they are going to succeed. If you know that you need to get more out of your team and you'd like to explore working with us, then just drop an X in the comments below this video, and one of our team will make an outreach to you. Sachin or myself will have a chat to you about working with us. Otherwise, go and deploy these strategies, and good luck. I look forward to hearing about how you go. So please do let us know how you go. If you watch this on replay, just type replay so we know who gets to see it live and who doesn't. Otherwise, go well.